Welcome back, MTG Joe here. We're here for another installment of the weekly meta breakdown where we look at the top performing decks on the MTG Arena ladder. Today we are focusing on standard best of one for this video. If you're looking for other formats, we have them in the respective playlist. Weekly meta breakdown, try to get through all the decks provided there's data each week. Large enough sample size to get at least 3-4 decks at the minimum. And we get the data as always from Untapped.gg. It's a companion tool that you see on the screen. Tracks your win rates, loss rates, deck collection, whole bunch of useful statistics and stuff, including in-game overlays. The link is in the video description if you want to sign up for that. A whole bunch of it is free. In addition, I will paste all these deck lists into the deck list into the video description on YouTube, so you can easily import these into Arena if you want to try these out yourself. So for this week, we are looking at October 16th through to the 23rd, Platinum to Mythic rank as always, and we're looking at a sample of 290,000 games of standard best of one played. And it's been a while, but my mono red decks, my mono red friends are back on top. 65% win rate with this configuration of mono Red Aggro. And notably, the card that we're seeing a 4 of in this deck is Rending Flame. We have a 3-mana deal 5 to target creature or planeswalker with the coincidental damage of 2 more to the permanent's controller, should the creature be a spirit. So this deals with Shieldred, deals with Adeline, deals with Rafine, deals with pretty much any creature in the format at 3-mana slot. The rest of the deck, what we have is they're basically trimming down on the play with fires, but you still have the lightning strikes in there as well. Hammerhand can give something a boost, haste, and unblockable. Plays very nicely with Radha's Firebrand, which gets around blockers. We have Kumano to do a whole bunch of things. Deal a damage, pump a creature, exile when it becomes a creature, when stuff is dealt damage, so it can get rid of stuff like Tenacious Underdog for good. We have Phoenix Chick, a recursive creature that is evasive that we can then pump more mana to get back from the graveyard. Bloodthirsty Adversary can be kicked to cast any of our burn spells, play with fire, lightning strike, rending flame. Radha, as I mentioned, it's also a mana sink late game that you can give it extra boost in damage. You have Reckless Stormseeker to give stuff haste. Squee Dubious Monarch is a recurring creature from the graveyard that can, if it goes unchecked, just keeps making more and more bodies. And then we have Thundering Raiju on the top end that puts counters on things, deals like alternative damage through like modified creature counts, and is another card. Like there's a couple cards in this deck that if they left unchecked, they run away with the game. Mana base very simple, 22 basics and a Sokuzan. The next deck is they're calling it now Humans, but basically it's mono white humans splash Halana and Alana. And you're really easily able to do so with the combination of Secluded Courtyard, which you choose creature type as humans, and then Plaza of Heroes. There's a lot of legendaries in the deck, so it often can cast as a rainbow land. You're also playing some Overgrown Farmlands, as well as Sundown Pass, and then Boseiju as a catch-all utility land. The creatures that we're seeing in the deck, we have Guardian of Nubenalia, which got much better after the ban of Meathook Massacre. Intrepid Adversary as an Anthem, Thalia, Guardian of Thraben as a tax effect, Valor Stance as removal or protection. Then you have Adeline, another similar to Squee. If it goes unchecked, it just takes over the game by spamming the board. Anointed Peacekeeper as tax effects, Brutal Cathar as removal, Wandering Emperor as removal, creatures, and pump. AO is just really, really good card that lets you find any of these other cards afterwards if it dies. And then Elspeth, which can help you dig for any of these creatures. And then just keyword soup basically onto your creatures themselves. We then go to Gruul Aggro, 63% win rate. So some similarities to the mono red deck. We have Kumano, Phoenix Chick, and Thundering Raiju, but we're also getting 4 drops in Halana and Alana to pump up our crew. We have Atushi as a card advantage or ramp. More often than not, if you're playing up to the 4-mana slot, you're probably going to take the card advantage. We have Ascendant Pack Leader that gets bigger when you cast any of these 4 drops. And then Llanowar, Loam Speaker helps bridge the gap to allow us to play these 4 drops on turn 3 and start getting accrued value that way. Some Shivan Devastators as a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 mana card, depending on how you want to play it on curve. Quirion Beast Caller lets you redistribute counters when it dies and gets bigger whenever you cast creatures. And then you have Yavimaya Iconoclast, 2 mana, 3/2 trample that can also be kicked to get haste and a +1/1 bonus for the turn. Mana base It's got Thran Portal. It's pretty good mana otherwise. I just hate Thran Portal. It just seems like such a bad design card, but helps you kind of always have, at least on turn 1 and 2, the consistent mana you need. We then go to Selesnya Enchantments. This is the no new cards deck. 61% win rate, and it's all kind of built around enchantment sub-theme. Naturalist gets your stuff cheaper. Generous Visitor lets you put counters when you cast enchantments. You have Weaver of Harmony that lets you double up on effects like ETBs, so double draw, double chapter 1 and 2, double exile, and then you have other ways to get really big. Kami gets really big on its own and can come back from the graveyard. Katilda on its own gets really buff, and then can be an enchantment to give one of your other creatures evasion. We then go to Esper Legends. So this deck is legendary in the sense it's playing Plaza Heroes and a bunch of legends. So it's a 61% win rate, and it's kind of built around Rada-Dravik. So basically when you have another legendary creature dies, you get a copy of it, except it's a 2/2 zombie. Your zombies have vigilance, and they don't get treated as legendary. So if you have 2 copies of Radabrick, one dies, becomes non-legendary, then you get 2 copies of each legendary that dies. So it's kind of cool that way there. You get really good mana because Plaza Heroes does all the fixing, plus you have all the Painland additionals in there. Plays nicely with these Ajanjos as well, because you get back a copy if it were to die, because I think this is just another legend creature you control. But this is just a cheap spell at this point. It's basically, think of it as a removal spell with 27 lines, because it's going to be most likely than not 1 mana. So the cards in the deck, you got like Dennick to hate on graveyards, as well as just a good lifelinker body. Ilias Core, Blood Artistry style effect, gain and drain. Jadar and this plays really nicely together. Your Jadars get you multiple zombies a turn. They have vigilance. When it attacks, yeah. So it's not that if it becomes tapped. I was seeing if like the vigilance subclause kind of gets around it. Thalia for tax, Raven Man, because there's a Raven Man in this deck. Probably wouldn't play Raven Man. I'd probably just play like another Dennick, to be honest. Or another like Wandering Emperor. There's no real discard synergy in the deck. I guess there's like a Toulouse and there's some Rafines. I guess with Rafine it does make sense. So I take that back. It makes you some birdies. But you got Rafines, you got Adelines. Rafine's really nice because you can chuck away your duplicate copies if you don't need them in a pinch. Toulouse lets you buy them back when it dies. Urtai removal counterspell. Sheoldred, just a hell of a card that kind of turns games into do you kill Sheoldred? If not, then you kind of win. Drawing a bunch of cards with Rafine gains you a bunch of life, and then some AOs on the top end. We then go to non-Naya humans, aka Monolite Aggro. And the biggest difference here is you're basically going to be a cleaner mana base. You're playing Sarah Paragon that lets you rebuy a bunch of your cards. And then you get the additional 1-drops in Hotshot Mechanic and Hopeful Initiate, as well as some copies of Valorous Stance mixed into there with Destroy Evil. Pretty much the cards are the same: Guardian, Intrepid, Thalia, Adeline. So it's kind of like, do you want to have more explosion with the haste and some more interactive elements? Or do you want to be just kind of... So this version probably lets you grind better because you have like Wandering Emperor, you have Elspeth, you have Ao, where this mono white version can hit harder initially but lacks some of the late game card advantage. 3 Ajanjos is also too many in a 23 line deck. I wouldn't play this many Ajanjos. You're going to get double lands and then have to sacrifice one of your lands. We then go to mono black aggro, so meathook no more. So this is just a lower to the ground version. You'll see a number of more 1-drops, Concealing Curtain to kind of eat out your opponent's hand. Cult Conscripts keeps coming back. Evolve Sleeper, big mana sink, gets you a whole bunch of value. Infernal Grasp as your pretty much only removal in this deck, so 2 copies. You also have Braids, which compare nicely with these smaller creatures to keep coming back. Sack, draw you some cards. Knight of Dusk Legion to shut off life gain. Tenacious Underdog to come back. You have Jadar, which you can sack the tokens to Braids to get some value there. Some Liliana to hand hate and to sacrifice. Not too much in terms of graveyard decks, so only a copy of Graveyard Trespasser, and then 4 Sheoldred on the top end. I would likely probably trim one of these, play a second Trespasser. You're at 4. So unlike the Legends deck, which doesn't care if you have Radaback out about duplicate copies, as well as has Rafine to kind of discard, if you're drawing 3 copies of a Sheoldred, it could be kind of disadvantageous as you kind of play things out. We then move to mono blue tempo. 59% win rate. So this deck is really built around Haughty Djinn. This is the deck where you say no to your opponent multiple times in multiple different ways. You hope you're always on the play, and you hope your opponent never leaves with basic mountain 1-drop. But the deck is really just trying to interact with your opponent on the stack. Syncopate, Spell Pierces, Make Disappears, Negates, Urtai's Scorn, Thirst for Discovery to kind of draw a bunch of cards, get the discount. Consider as a way to kind of draw some cards, Impulse to find stuff. Once something resolves, your only answer to it is Fading Hope, and you're really trying to win off the back of Haughty Djinn or Tolarian Terror. Most of these decks aren't playing too many copies. With the mono red deck, this can't be countered. So Rending Flame can be countered, but it is a clean answer to all these threats of mono blue at 4 and 5 toughness. And then lastly, we have Rakdos midrange. This is closer to the traditional mono black control that we've seen in the past. Moving away from mono black, you get Bloodtithe Harvester in the Rakdos build, as well as Fable the Mirror Breaker. This lets you copy, kind of have every turn an extra removal spell with Bloodtithe Harvester, or extra copies of Trespasser. Still playing the Invoke top end. Playing Xander's Lounge as another dual land. You can play the Jund Triome, Zeotor's Proving Ground. If you have those instead, you can play 2/2, 1/3, whatever it may be. You're really just playing for an additional cycling land that happens to produce black and red mana. But you got your Sorens, Sheoldreds, all the bangers in here. This version's a little bit heavier in terms of targeted removal to hopefully deal with some of those earlier creatures. Given that the meta right now is looking very aggressively focused, I'd probably trim maybe one Liliana and maybe go a second Sorin, just because the lifelink could be relevant. Because a lot of these decks, if you look at, they're going to have multiple creatures or ways to make tokens. So Sacrifice with a Squee doesn't really do much. Same with the Naya Humans deck. Like Adeline, they'll have tokens. We saw a lot of Jadars in here as well. So a lot of cheap creatures that can be sacked or recursive with stuff like Phoenix Chick in these decks. So that's it for the week. Let me know what you've been playing. The meta seems to be fairly aggro. So it does maybe open up the opportunity for something like a blue-white control deck, or a more heavier removal based like black-white control deck to come out into play. So we'll see how the meta evolves in future weeks now that Meathook is banned. I guess Depopulated be the cleanest sweeper at 4 mana. It does technically draw them a card, but a lot of these decks are mono-colored. And then you have Farewell on the top end. In any case, thanks for watching. Hope you have a great one. And if you can, drop a like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.